The last week of the campaign is basically over. So I'm just going to give a very quick schedule update in case you missed the community post that I made on, Tuesday or Wednesday. The weekly update is going up today. This is the video that you're watching. This is the video that I've been making every Sunday. And the reason I'm making a day early is because Monday has a polling embargo. Legally, no one is allowed to publish any polls on election day. So every single polling company publishes all of their polls right before midnight on Sunday. The effect that this has is that half of the video on the polling and the situations would be immediately irrelevant because we would have so much new data. Today's video is simply about the polls from this past week, what has happened in them, and then of course the general campaign updates that things have been happening with. I will make another video on Sunday night, very likely Monday morning for most of you out east, about all of the polls, and you can watch it in the morning before you go out and vote, or if you've already voted, you can kind of use it as a pre-election night video. And I'll talk about in that video how each of the Liberals and the Conservatives can win a minority or a majority. And I think that will be an important discussion because the polls have a chance to be very wrong here. And I'll talk about it a little bit in this video, but I'll go more in depth on the video on Sunday night / Monday morning. So without further ado, the polls this week. They were not awful, but they were not necessarily good, obviously. The Liberals have been pretty steady in their vote. The Conservatives have been pretty steady, but the Conservatives have increased. As you can see, 338 Canada has the lines overlapping, not insignificantly, once again. But when you scroll down, you will see the tightening has been very minimal, right? Like, it certainly has happened, but if the polls were to be 100% accurate, it's likely that this is not enough for a Conservative win. Now, 338 Canada's update does not include today's update, the 26th, because I just need to record this video, and all of the major polling updates will come in the Sunday video, so I'm not too worried about it. Speaking of the individual polls, we have some individual polls. There is a slight trend, if you can see it here, and that is that the NDP has risen slightly. Main Street still has them pretty low on this one day, and they have them a little bit low today, but they are now hovering in the 7.5% to 10% range, which is still awful for them. Let's not forget they got nearly 20% last time. But this kind of recovery shows that a lot of NDP voters who went Liberal are either switching back to the NDP or simply choosing to not vote Liberal anymore. Now, I also want to bring this up. Kalowski is an unknown pollster. And by unknown, I mean they've technically existed since, 2013 or 14. They have some ties to the Conservative Party, but so many of the other polls have ties to the Liberal Party, so it's like, okay, whatever. And they're unknown. Their biggest thing is they're unknown. We don't know how well Kalowski is going to do. They have it as a tie race, and this is in comparison to a lot of the other polls that we have. Innovative did have a tie race, actually, very recently, and a lot of the polls have it within 2 or 3%. Even Nanos is seeing it within 3% now. Now, the block is really hard to look at in terms of the national percentage, just because a lot can happen within the 6 to 7% range. So if you want to look at how things are going in Quebec, we can pretty clearly see that the bloc has rebounded in support a little bit, but on seats specifically, they have completely rebounded from where they were at the beginning of the campaign. It means that the Liberal majority path got a lot narrower, and it also means that a polling error, which I believe could occur, will make this gap shrink even further. Now, this was an article posted in the National Post a few days ago, and the bloc sees an opportunity to play offensive. Now, the bloc was also playing defensive this week. They were playing both because the race is close. When the race is this close, and you could flip some ridings, you could also lose some ridings, you got to play both offense and defense. And according to one of the bloc members, they said, I don't really feel a surge in the Liberal vote. People come and argue with me sometimes saying, well, we're always voting for the bloc. Now we're a little scared. It takes a few minutes to explain that if we're not there, no one speaks for Quebec, and then people understand that very quickly. What that tells me is that the people that move from the bloc to the Liberals are very soft support. And any support shown by the bloc towards them will easily sway them back. And I think that's why we've been seeing the bloc tighten up, because people come to realize, oh, the Liberals are not for me. in Quebec. I think this is a trend that will continue all the way through to election night, and this is something to look out for. Now, speaking of voting, we have the turnout numbers. Advanced turnout was up huge. It was up 25% in 1 year. Now, typically, when turnout is this big, it is cause for change. And change generally means a change in government. But there is a not insignificant amount of people that believe Carney is that change. Which, again, I don't know how many times I need to say it because it's totally BS. David Cleto has this. This is a good graph for the Conservatives, or typically would be, where the change election has driven right back up. Now, before the election was called, and I mean well before the election was called, change was the main issue, main driving issue. But then Trump came in and Trump started to dominate. But about midway through the campaign, we saw it switch back. Change became the primary focus and Trump became the secondary focus, which, as I said at the beginning of the campaign, is actually a good thing for the Conservatives. Now, dealing with Trump, this is exactly what I said at the beginning of the campaign. You really can't expect for this, the dealing with Trump bars, to change. But the change bars, 25% thinking Carney is change, is ludicrous. And if that is true, it does make the path for the Conservatives quite difficult. It also means that this 7.3 million number is not all Conservative voters. In fact, it very likely isn't. Most of the 7.3 million vote is very likely from the boomers. The boomers, who are very concerned about dealing with Trump, who are voting early, are in the dealing with Trump camp, as we can see. And of course, there will be some people that are voting for change. I voted early, and I would be part of this change category, but I definitely wasn't the majority. There's no way I was the majority in the early vote. What that means is on election day, if there's a high turnout, it's a very good sign for the Conservatives, because that means all the people that want change, which are majority Conservative, should be able to break this dealing with Trump boost that they got in the early voting. Now, why do I say it was likely boomer voters that turned out? Well, it's based on a lot of the surveys that we've gotten. Now, Abacus is estimating a 71% turnout, and I think that's a pretty conservative estimate if we're assuming this is a change election. I think the estimate really ranges from between 70 and 80% turnout. The higher the turnout, the better for the Conservatives. Of those that already voted, the Liberals have an advantage. Now, according to Abacus, the advantage is 43 to 36. According to other polls, it's much greater. It's in like the plus 15 range. I really don't think the actual number matters, whether it's 43 or 50 for the Liberals or 36 or 40 for the Conservatives. I don't think that specific number matters. I think what matters is that they're all seeing that the Liberals very likely turned out more on election, or not on election day, on advanced voting days, which is expected, again, because of the boomers who vote early, and the boomers are more liberal this time around. Now, I also want to bring this up. This is something that I am very curious about come election day. David Cleto, the CEO of Abacus, tweeted about this and made a whole Substack article about it. And then Juno News, who you can believe or not, it's up to you, also ran a very similar neighbor poll. Now, what is the neighbor poll? Essentially, instead of asking someone who they're voting for, you're asking someone who they think their neighbors are going to vote for. So the goal with doing it this way is primarily to get around a response bias, because I think the Liberals have had a very large response bias due to their base now being older and during the weekday showing a closer race, especially because now the Conservatives are picking up a lot of the blue-collar work when they obviously cannot answer the phone during workdays. And so, the neighbor poll shows the Conservatives with actually a 4-point lead. That means the people answering this poll think that their neighbors are actually voting Conservative more than the people answering the polls are voting Liberal. And in Juno News' poll, we see it at 40-38. Now, the reason that I bring up this number, aside from the response bias, is this actually, in my opinion, shows one of the possible outcomes for the polls to be wrong. Because if the polls were, if this were to be the final result, 44-40, the aggregate of the polls would be incredibly wrong. Aggregate on the polls right now is 42-38 for the Liberals. So for it to be 44-40 is very significantly different. And it's one way that I think the polls could potentially be wrong. That is it for the polling discussion, because I'm constantly wading into hypotheticals here. If you want a full polling breakdown on how things could turn out on election day based on the polls and how the polls could be wrong, watch the Sunday night, Monday morning video. I will talk about it in depth there. So on to the news. Singh has this whole week been playing defensive. And by defensive, I mean defensive of his character. He has admitted to intentionally killing the NDP and helping the Liberals because he sees Pierre as this great threat, which is even more absurd when you consider Carney has stole so many of Pierre's ideas, and he is the exact thing that the NDP is supposed to hate, a globalist banker. So essentially, he killed the NDP because he likes the Liberals more than the NDP. There's no other way to put it. And he has fully admitted to it this week, thinking it makes his image look better. It really doesn't. It actually makes him look worse. And him doing this, killing the NDP in this way, I wonder if it's permanent. I wonder how many people have now left the NDP that are now thinking, what's the point? For the NDP to recover after this election, it will take a very good leader to return to the party's roots. The only one that might be able to do it, because they can claim they're an outsider and they're returning the party to its roots, is Rachel Notley. But I guarantee you after this election, we're going to see an NDP leadership campaign. Now, in terms of other news, we had Carney lying again. Shocker. The phone call between Trump and Carney earlier in the election campaign, the one that Carney, I included in the video too, the one that Carney so graciously and effortlessly said, you know, Trump, I made Trump respect our sovereignty and things were good, and nope. Trump went right back to the 51st state stuff. In that call, he completely avoided everything. And now we have the leak of the actual phone call itself, where Carney called Trump a transformative president who respects Canada's sovereignty, which is, no. And it really just shows how much Carney can lie. Now, will this have any effect on the election results? If this had come out before the debate, I think it might have. But because it didn't, because it came after the advanced voting days, a lot of the boomers that voted specifically to stop Trump, which their vote mainly going to Carney for that, I wonder how many of them are regretting it after seeing this story. I would assume not many, because most of them are probably lifetime liberals. But the ones who went from conservative to liberal specifically because of Trump, who have not voted yet, there is a chance that this actually could stop them from voting or make them vote conservative. I could totally see this happening. Will it happen in enough numbers to matter? It's really hard to say. On its own, I don't think it'll happen in enough numbers to matter. But when combined with other demographic shifts, it could. But that is it for the update this week. Like I said, I didn't want to go into too many hypotheticals in this video because that is for the final election day video that will be going up. And these videos are supposed to be looking at the week we just had. Now, I do want to reiterate again. Yes, there is a chance the Conservatives can win this election, but you also need to brace yourself for the fact that the Conservatives could just as easily lose this election. I really think this is a coin flip, because it is impossible to know how much the demographics have shifted. If the demographic shift is very extreme, then it could even result in Conservative majority. But if the demographic shift is pretty minor, the Conservatives really don't have a lot of hope. There is a lot of unknown in this election. It is easily the most chaotic election that we've had in a long time. There really hasn't been a two-way race like this election since 1957 or 1958, one of the two. And so a lot of the models are completely thrown off. We really don't know how this is going to go, but for whatever it is, buckle up, because I think the result from the public after this election will be, no matter who wins, will be severe. I think there's going to be a lot of pissed off people. That is it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.